In this video, I want to talk to you about tracking your finances. I often get asked on where to start. How do you get good with money? And the truth is, tracking is at the foundation. In order for you to manage your money well, you first need to understand it. And that does not come with setting strict rules. So while many people think that budgeting is the first step, the truth is, you cannot set a plan for your money without understanding your income and your spending. And that's where tracking comes in. Tracking is watching where your money comes and goes. It is monitoring every deposit, every withdrawal, every auto pay, and every cash or credit charge that you do. It is the baseline. Whereas budgeting is deciding in advance where you want your money to go. But you can't set a clear plan for your money without a baseline in your spending. And you'd only get that from tracking. And so for many people, tracking becomes enough. Tracking is the ultimate reverse budget. And so for me, I've only ever done tracking and I've been able to grow my wealth. I would swear up and down that if you're trying to get ahead with money, you need to start tracking. Tracking gives you the same intentionality and control that budgeting does, but it does it without giving you strict rules. And it is so easy to do, and it is simple. So, how did I start? When I started, it was in the 1990s, the late 1990s, and I got a simple at a glance calendar. And I started to track my income and my spending. And tracking your income is just as important as tracking your spending because you're going to use these numbers to determine how you're doing. And you want to use broad categories when you are tracking. So as you're writing things down, and let's just say today is September 18th as I film this, you're going to write down your spending that you're doing today and include anything that may have come out on auto pay as well. And you're going to track your income as well. So on the dates that you get paid, you're going to track that as well. And then over time, you're going to move your daily log over to something like a budget. And some people use a budget book, or some people nowadays use apps. So there's the app that I can transfer my spending, Moneyfy, and I can use that. Or I can use a combination of the two. So I technically use Credit Karma and it tracks all my credit card spending. And then I use cash on top that I would just add to that number. And I transfer a lot of the spending into a MoneyFi app. But a lot of people like using spreadsheet. I say keep it as simple as possible to what you're going to do. And so I used a home simplified budget book when I first started tracking. And this gave me the broad categories. So you had food, clothing, laundry, rent, mortgage. On here it had telephone, electricity, household expenses, auto expenses, insurance, loans, education, entertainment, personal care, gifts, and miscellaneous. And then it had other items that might have been tax deductible. And those included medical expenses, contribution, interest, taxes, childcare, miscellaneous. And then you also want to track your savings. Any excess that you have above your income and your spending, that technically would be money that you saved as well if you're not tracking savings on a line item that you have going into savings. So why does tracking income and expenses, what does it really entail? It gives you awareness of your cash flow. Because you're monitoring and paying attention to all the money that is coming in and out, you're getting to see a picture of your spending, of your income, and whether or not your life fits within the parameters of your paycheck. And sometimes you're going to find that you might need to trim your expenses. And other times you'll find that you may have to increase your income. And other times, a combination of the two can really help. But every paycheck, every side hustle, every windfall, every tax refund, as well as the spending side of the equation, anything that you're paying out. So your rent, your food cost. So the inflows, outflows together are going to give you real clarity, and that's your awareness of your cash flow. And then you're going to have categorizations. So you're going to see some of this is going to go into needs category budget, and some are going to be wants category budget, and others are going to be for savings and debts. So there is a guideline to go by. There is 50% of your spending should be on needs, 30% on wants, and 20% towards savings and debts. Now, I always like to flip that and do 20% towards wants and 30 on savings and debts. But in the beginning, most people are not within the 50, 30, 20 guideline. And it's a warning sign if you are not. So, using myself as an example, when I first started budgeting, my rent alone took 93% of my income. It was a major red flag. I knew that I needed to go earn more income. And so a lot of people will use credit cards to fill the gap when they're not earning enough money and they don't even realize how bad the situation is. So tracking gives you the comparison against your income. So you're going to see a baseline of your spending. And once all your expenses are tracked and all your income is logged, you're going to see how you stand out. Are you earning enough to sustain your lifestyle? And it's going to naturally highlight opportunities for you to adjust. And you're going to spot imbalances. You're going to spot areas where you are spending too much, or maybe you're not earning enough. And so it's going to show you the proportion. Again, use the 50, 30, 20 rule as a guideline to see areas where that you can highlight and revert back to later when you need to make adjustments, because it's a warning sign if you're consistently spending more than you earn and you're using credit to fill the gaps. And so sometimes the answer is going to be trimming expenses. Other times it's going to be increasing your income, or a combination of the two. But over time, as you're tracking your income and your spending, not just your expenses, but your income and your spending, you're going to see patterns emerge. You're going to see how you spend money, not how I spend money, how you spend money. And you're going to see areas that maybe you can improve upon. And there are going to be three things that you can do. So, tracking gives you the feedback loop that you would need to make decisions when it comes to your money. And some of those decisions can help you tighten up your finances to get them within the guidelines, or at least get your income and spending so that you're not spending more than you're earning back into balance. So, what you're going to notice over the first 30 days, you might notice fixed versus variable cost. You're going to see things that possibly cannot change without some drastic move on your part. So, for instance, if your mortgage is a certain amount or your rent is a certain amount, that's considered a fixed cost. And the only way to change that is either to downsize or move. Another area you're going to see is your variable cost. You're going to see things like spending on discretionary items, or maybe things that are fall in the want category. And sometimes it's a mix of needs and wants, where wants could spill into our needs. And for this case, I mean something like a car payment. You need a car potentially, but you don't need $1,000 car payment. So you'll see the mix between the two. And then the other thing you're going to notice is timing gaps. You're going to notice timing of when you get paid versus when expenses are due. And then last but not least, you're going to see seasonal and irregular expenses come in. And these could be things like maybe you need a car repair, or maybe insurance comes due certain times of year, or cost associated with enrollment or school fees. And all this logging of income and expenses are going to show you areas that maybe money is leaking out of your life. Some of these could be big things, and some of these could be microtransactions that are happening on the daily that are causing you to spend more money. And even small habitual habits add up. And so that's what it's going to show you. And then as you do this, you're going to be able to review and adjust. This is what tracking is really about. It isn't about just watching and monitoring without making any changes. You want to be able to review and adjust. And there are going to be four things that you do as you do this. One of them could be that you're going to cancel things. You're going to stop services that are no longer servicing you, that are no longer serving you. So, for instance, if you have duplicate services, that maybe you have a number of subscriptions that meet the same thing. So, for instance, if I would use myself as an example, let's say I have Cap Pro, I think it's called, on YouTube, where I can edit videos, and then I also have a tool where I can make thumbnails. Maybe I can cancel one of them. I'm forgetting what they're called, but I can cancel one in place of the other. One could take its place. Another example is people will use this Hulu and Netflix and Apple TV and all the different variables when it comes to subscription services. Some of them you can cancel. The next one would be cut. There are going to be certain items on your expense list that you could actually cut that are not going to make a difference in your life. In my husband and my case, when we moved in together and after we got married, we decided we could be a one car family. So we actually cut our car cost. We cut one entire insurance bill, fuel cost, and the need of or worry about getting parking tickets or having any car impounded, which had happened to me before. Any car repairs. So completely cut a category out of our spending. One full car cost. So that's cut. So look for items in your spending that you could potentially cut that you're not going to feel a difference with. And then the next area would be cap. This would be where you're going to set a cap on how much your spending is going to be. Let's say you go out to eat and you're dining. Instead of spending $400 a month, you decide you prefer to allocate a little bit less money and you'd rather spend $200 a month. That would save you $200 to spend elsewhere. So capping would be setting a simple top of how much you want to spend on a specific line item in your spending each month. And then there's curb. This would be reduce the number of frequency of what you're doing. Let's say you have a daily coffee habit and you want to curb that expense. So you just reduce the frequency and maybe you're going to make coffee at home. You have a Keurig and you'll make coffee at home or and have less coffee out. Maybe you're only going to go and get coffee 3 times a week. So that would be an example of curbing an expense. Now, you want to then, all those costs that you're cutting out, you want to reallocate that to go to an area of need. Maybe you're moving it to savings. Whatever you're prioritizing, is it debt payoff? Are you trying to pay off student loans? Are you trying to come up with money so that you could have a down payment? That's the potential of what you're doing with this review and adjust as you're looking over your numbers, as you're comparing your spending to your income. Sometimes it's about bringing things back into balance. And when you find if the numbers are not working out, if you have more month than you do money, there are going to be some bigger things that you need to do. And number one would be review that 50-30-20 guideline and use it as a diagnostic. So try to keep all your needs under 50%. This would be all housing, transportation, insurance, all the big ticket items. You want to use it as a diagnostic, not to determine whether or not are there areas that you can cut back. And then you might want to right size the big rocks. And this could mean that maybe you do have to move apartments. Maybe you do not need the 2-bedroom apartment and you could go down to a 1-bedroom, particularly if it's just 2 people and you don't need 2-bedroom, 2-bath, or you move a little bit further away, or you have extra space and you get a roommate and you sort of house hack. If you own your own place, then you determine maybe you can rent out your garage to reduce some of your cost and you allow someone to park overnight in your driveway. Anything that you can do to right size your expenses. And in our case, as the example I used, one of the bigger ticket items that we did was transportation. We eliminated and cut a car bill. The next thing you want to do is you want to restructure or renegotiate some of your bills. It could be that you call the cable company and you cut the cable, or you reduce the Wi Fi speed to a smaller speed amount. You change your phone plan from one to another and you have less data to use. But you could also look at the interest rates that you're paying on your credit cards and try to negotiate paying less, particularly as interest rates are going down right now. You could also try 0% financing and moving money over so that you pay less interest on the money that you do owe. And so, as you're coming up with ways to review and adjust to come with money to pay down debt, you actually are paying less over time into interest. And then the last thing you want to do is if you are not earning enough money, if there is more month than there is money, you want to sequence your cash flow. And this means you have to stabilize it first. First, look to cover your expenses, then look to build a cash buffer, and then worry about focusing on the debts. And it may mean that after you did all the reviews and adjustments that you could make on your spending, it may mean that you need to play offense. And in this case, this may mean that you need to do some short term things to earn more money. In my case, I ended up picking up as much overtime as I could get after I also made the change with a job. I went from one employer to another and got a really big raise by doing that. I went from making 30,000 to 45,000. That was essentially a 50% raise, but that still wasn't enough to cover everything completely comfortable. So I ended up having to get another job and I worked weekends. I did catering, waitressing. I did so many things to earn more money. I took care of the property of where I live, meaning vacuuming and cleaning just to get a little bit extra a week. And then I used that money and I made it very visible. All the extra money that I was earning went directly to pay down the debts. And I also increased my 401k contributions and made sure that I was saving a little bit in cash. It's very important to build the cash saving muscle. And that means starting out, even as you're paying down debt, you need to build at least a small emergency buffer and not just attack the debt because you don't want to go back to relying on credit cards. So make any income that you have coming in extra, make it visible and use it directly to go towards the debts. The biggest example that I can use for recently is I was earmarking my entire paycheck to go towards our debt payoff on our rental mortgage. And it took us 4 years, but we paid off our rental property using my salary. When you have a target of what you're going to do with your money, you get things done. And so I can't stress that enough. Make your goals visible and make any extra money that you have going in towards that goal. And then the last thing you could do is you can go for some medium plays. And that could be maybe you ask for a raise at work, you start selling items, and you look for other ways to make money, even if it means doing freelance things on the side and trying to make it work. So now how does tracking, why am I such an advocate for tracking? How does it naturally get you to spend less? So the first thing tracking does, it helps you establish a baseline of your spending. You actually know your true monthly numbers. You see the money that's coming in, you see the money that is going out, and it lets you know your baseline. And by having your baseline, it helps you not overcommit your income to something else. So a lot of people, when they're earning a certain amount of money, they think it sounds like a lot. And then they may say, well, I can afford that. I can afford a $600 a month car payment. I'm making $100,000 a year. But once you see your baseline, it can prevent you from overcommitting elsewhere because you see how little is left over after you're done paying the bills, after you're done paying maybe student loans or other things that you have racked up in debt. So knowing your baseline and knowing what your costs are can actually put you in a position of preventing you to overcommitting more of your money to go elsewhere. And I loved that about tracking. The next thing that tracking does is what I would like to call the receipt effect. The fact that you have to log down your spending or write down your spending, it's the same thing as when you are doing food journaling. When you have to write down what you're eating every day, it can get you to eat less. And tracking your finances, every purchase, every spending thing that you do, it's a natural deterrent to make you spend less. You don't want to write it down, you don't want to account for it. And so that stops and reduce you from overspending or impulse purchasing. The next thing that tracking does is it exposes invisible spending. Some people don't even realize habits that they have or microtransactions that they're doing add up. And tracking puts it front and center. It can no longer hide in the background because you have to write it down and because you are tracking your money and logging all your spending. And then you are adding up where you are at the end of the month and seeing that category, it puts it front and center. And so it's much easier to cancel and cut back what you see. And so it puts invisible spending and makes it visible for you so that you can make some decisions about your money. The next thing tracking does, it shifts towards cash flow awareness. When you know what your spending is and how much you have left for discretionary, it allows you to make trade offs. And trade offs sometimes are necessary for you to come up with money. And so, for instance, if after you're done paying everything and you realize you have $200 left over, you can decide, do I want to spend $200 on going out to eat, or should I only spend $100 more on going out to eat? Should I earmark the rest of that to go towards savings or to go towards debt? You make better trade offs when you're tracking. The next thing that tracking does, it identifies natural guardrails for you. There are areas of your spending where you are so disciplined because it doesn't bring you value. It may not bring you as much joy as other areas. And so it's very easy to cut back on areas where it is so easy for you to just cut it out. And so, for instance, for me, I occasionally get my nails done and I could completely cut that out. And I have in the past cut out that category when I've been looking for ways to save money. And it was not painful. It doesn't feel punishing when you're cutting areas. Now, had you come to me and told me that I needed to completely cut my going out budget, that would feel more painful. But because I was already disciplined in that area, it was very easy for me to say, you know what? I don't need to spend money on makeup. I don't need to spend money on getting my nails done. And so you're going to identify your own natural guardrails of where you don't spend a lot of money. And then the next thing that tracking does, it encourages you to continue. It turns your small wins into motivating features. And so, for instance, whenever I was doing debt payoff and I was able to see month in and month out that the debt was going down, it kept me motivated. It made it visible for me. And I was able to build momentum on that. So, tracking alone does that. It encourages small wins and it helps keep you motivated on track towards your goal. Pun pun there. And the last thing that tracking does, whether you're doing it solo or with a partner, it keeps you accountable. So tracking is a real great accountability tool. You're going to know where all your money is being spent, and money doesn't leak out that way. It's harder to justify spending on purchases when you have to be accountable for them. And so, in theory and in practice, it then gets you to spend less. So I want to share extra strategies that reinforce spending less and less expense tracking for me. I'm going to share some of the things that I personally do that gets me to spend less and having to track less. And the first one would be paying my bills first. I cannot stress enough how important this is. Paying my bills first allows me to see how much is left over. It also allows me to avoid lifestyle creep. It's the same effect as when you buy clothing and you go to put it in the closet. If the closet is full and things are starting to be very difficult to close, then something has to come out. And so, me paying my bills first is a natural way for me to avoid lifestyle creep. And seeing how much I'm spending and how much is left over for discretionary, sometimes it actually allow me, and when I see it, to easily cut other areas because I want to keep my expenses in check. So paying my bills first stops me from having my money drift up and lifestyle creep. uh, it allows me to spot it before it gets out of control. The next trick that I do is what I like to call leave home without it. We tend to spend a lot of cash, but I also do some things on credit cards. And so I tend to leave home without my phone or without any cash or credit on me. And that gets me to just live in the moment and not spend any money. And it's a frictionless way to get me to just stay living in the moment and not spending anything. So the less I carry, the less temptation, because I know I can't spend money if I'm not carrying any money on me. And the next thing that I do is what I like to call the cash envelope system. A lot of people cash in envelopes and they determine how much they're going to spend. We don't do that exactly. What we do instead is at the beginning of every month, we take out a certain amount of cash and we use that for all our discretionary purchases. In restaurants by us, they actually charge you less when you pay cash. So it is much more rewarding not to have to, or it's much more, I'm losing my words, but it's smarter for us to pay cash so that we're not paying for a fee to use a credit card. And so we tend to take out a certain amount of cash at the beginning of the month. And so, for instance, if that's $1,000, then we know we're spending just $1,000 on discretionary. That could be for things like going out and picking up some vitamins or going on a coffee run or going to restaurants to eat. However, we're going to spend our discretionary money, we're going to use a lot of it is going to be cash. And so if we're using more cash quickly, then we're going to have to run to the ATM and we're going to see how often we do that. And so going to cash makes spending more visible. And so if we're spending the $1,000 and let's say it's the 15th of the month and we have to run to the ATM, we're going to notice that. And if each additional ATM run is another $200, we'll be able to see how much spending we're doing. And you literally can stop you from it can stop you from going over and when you see how much and how often you're withdrawing funds. So while we don't do specific envelopes for, let's say, groceries, we take that money and use it and then write down as our spending. And by the way, groceries is in there as well. So the next thing that I do is what I like to call this or that and take on what I call as the Goldilocks principle. Knowing your prices and comparing them is really important because there are some times when you can get equivalent value at a non-equivalent price. Sometimes two things that are worth or the same value can be such different pricing. So know and compare your pricing. And on top of that is the Goldilocks principle, and that is sometimes it isn't about brands. It's not the real choices in between the brands. It's about the size, the model, or the features that go along with it. And pick something that isn't necessarily the cheapest or isn't the priciest, but is just right for what you need. Often people will pick to the highest end of the limit of what they can afford. And sometimes that means they're getting more than they need. So go for Goldilocks. And by this, I'll use an example of the iPhone 17. The iPhone 17 comes in the iPhone 17, the iPhone 17 Pro, and the iPhone 17 Pro Max. In addition to that, there is the 2 terabytes of data on the iPhone Pro Max. If you're going to be getting that particular phone, that is at the height of the limit of what you can buy in the phone, but it's probably much more than you need in data. Most people do not need 1,000 hours of video. They don't need 1,500,000 worth of pictures. I think there's 750, no, maybe it's 250,000 pictures. I'm pretty sure my numbers might be off, but there's a lot of photos that you could take with just one T. And imagine that for 2T. Most people don't even have 250,000 photos on their phone. They don't need as much data. So really be mindful of your spending. You want to purchase what you need, but not more than what you need. And the last thing that I will say that we do is we're very mindful of the influences that we have. You want to be conscientious of the inputs because the inputs directly affect the outputs. And so spending isn't just about numbers, it's about environment. And that means the influences in your life can get you to spend money. They can trigger you to buy purchases. And so by this, I mean social influences. If you're watching someone who is doing a they're doing a shopping haul and you're watching that, before you know it, you could end up buying something. None of us are immune to influences in our life that can get us to buy things that we didn't even know we needed. We didn't even know that we wanted. And so sometimes if your goal is, let's say, debt payoff, change your feed. Change what the inputs so that your outputs are different. Watch channels that instead promote minimalism so that you're more happy and content with the things that you do have. Or channels like this one that would never try to sell you anything so that you're not spending your money on and you're avoiding making impulse purchases because at the end of the day, if you're watching things that are pushing you away from your goal, then you're going to potentially slip up and waste money and focus your inputs on what your goals are. So, and that could also mean something like don't walk through the malls, instead walk through the park. Maybe avoid scrolling on Amazon and putting things in your cart. Just stay out of shopping sites in general if your goal is to save money and pay down debts. Focus on curating your influence around your goals because that's going to go a long way and make it easier for you to stay aligned with what you want done. Anyway, closing the loop. Tracking expenses isn't about restriction. It is about awareness. When you understand the money that is coming in and going out, you're able to make better decisions when it comes to your money. You're able to focus on saving, paying down debt. Then eventually that will go towards investing and building wealth. And before you know it, you're not just tracking your finances, you're tracking your network, you're tracking your savings rate, you're tracking all things that will get you on the goal to building wealth. So, tracking is the foundation. Budgeting is a blueprint that you want for your money, but you can do everything with tracking. You don't have to be as restrictive with your money. Some people are great at budgeting, and many other people fail. But with tracking, most people are able to do it and they're able to stay on track. Pay your bills first, protect your priorities, make sure that when you can, you leave home without your spending tools so that you don't spend money and you eliminate temptation so that you're not having your goals be taken from you. And by limiting your cash withdrawals, you're making your habits visible, including your ATM ones. And so over time, tracking is going to become second nature. It is second nature for me. I've been doing it for, oh, geez, 27 years now. And every dollar is accounted for. Every decision I make is intentional. And honestly, that has brought me closer to genuine money management and building wealth. Thank you for tuning in. And this video has gotten super long. This is Regina from Simply Fundamental. Hit like and subscribe and share this with anyone that you think this can help because I think it can help a lot of people. And yes, smash that like button because that helps the YouTube algorithm and find its way to more people. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you on the next one.